Welcome back. I'm Raphael. I have the pleasure to present Lindsay from Yammer. Lindsay is going to talk about A/B testing. It's something dear to my heart. We at Google do it a lot. Yammer is a very established company. It was acquired by Microsoft, so I'm very much looking forward to how you guys used A/B testing. Lindsay runs the product team, or a product team of Yammer, and the London office, right?
That's right.
Take it from here.
Great, thank you. All right, hi everybody. So yeah, I'm here to talk about A/B testing, and I'm going to walk through some of the tests Yammer has run and what you can learn from them. So let's see if this is working. Just to get started, for those of you that aren't familiar with Yammer, Yammer is basically an enterprise social network. And so what that means is you sign up with your corporate email address, and then we join you into a social network with everybody else with that same domain. It's a freemium product, which means most users are signing up for free, and then we're upselling to like your network IT admin, and that's actually where we make our money. So Yammer was acquired in 2012, a couple years ago, by Microsoft. So we're an enterprise product. We have about 12 million users right now, and our mission is to engage and empower employees. We want to make their companies open and more connected, because we believe companies that are open move faster and make better decisions, because we've broken down those silos where information traditionally lives. Anyway, what matters for this talk is basically we're in the enterprise space. We're owned by Microsoft. Those are two big things, but we're still A/B testing. We're still making mistakes, so I wanted to share our experiences. For those of you that aren't familiar with A/B testing, it's basically just the ability to show some of your users one thing and other users something else. So it's randomly distributed, so you can measure the difference between what these two people are seeing. So the example here, basically 50% of people are seeing the orange bar, and 50% see the green bar, and you can tell the difference in their behavior. You want to isolate a change, and then you can measure the impact of that change. So when you think about A/B testing, most people probably think about the ability to A/B test different copy, different colors, maybe a marketing page. But actually, you can really A/B test big experience changes to your product, and I think that's what's really interesting. So the first principle of A/B testing is to measure what's important. And this sounds super easy. You guys are probably all sitting there thinking like, yeah, come on, of course I can do that. But it's actually much harder than it looks when you start getting into it. So let me share a recent Yammer example of this. So groups are really important in Yammer. It's where most people get their communication done. And we suggest groups for you to join, because we want to help you get in the right groups. And so recently we looked at our suggested groups module, and it looked like this. And it's super crappy looking. I don't know if you can tell, but like, there's no real clear call to action about how to join these groups. There are these like weird big pictures. There's very little information about the groups. And so we thought, we can redesign this and do a better job. And this is what we came up with. So it's much clearer. You can see the groups. We show you a little description about the group, the number of members, and a clear call to action. So we A/B tested this and showed it to 50% of users. And what happened? Group joins went up 160%. This is a ridiculous number. Like, this is absolutely amazing. And so we all sat there thinking, like, this is incredible. But was this actually the goal of our product? Like, is this actually success? So what I want to talk about is global metrics. Global metrics, you want to measure the long-term value of your product, not just a feature. They should be stable and predictive of your long-term product goals. So let's take the previous example in another light. Let's imagine we take Yammer. We add a giant pink button in the middle of Yammer. And our measure for success is how many people click the button. Of course it's going to win. People are going to click the button. It's in the middle of the page. But is that really beneficial for Yammer? I think everybody agrees. Like, we're going to lose people pretty quickly if we just add a giant pink button. And so the point is, you want, when you're A/B testing, to look at metrics that both optimize your feature, which we call local metrics, and also global metrics, which are about your entire product. And the point here is that every project needs to optimize the entire product, not just a feature. So what are Yammer's global metrics? The first one is engagement. The number of days in a week a user engages with Yammer. So we want to increase the number of days somebody uses Yammer. Interestingly, because Yammer is an enterprise sales product, we have very long sales cycles, multi-year cycles. We don't want to get up to like 30 days before a contract renewal and find out somebody's not going to pay us money. Like, we need monetization. Engagement is actually our best leading indicator of whether a network is going to monetize or not. And so that's one of the reasons that engagement's really important for us. Retention. So new users, again, we don't want to have a leaky bucket. We want to make sure when someone signs up for Yammer that they're with us 7 days later. And virality. Because Yammer's a messaging product, it's kind of would be terrible to use alone. You want to make sure your team's on Yammer, your company's on Yammer, and so virality is super important to us. And these 3 metrics really haven't changed since Yammer started. These are the 3 we look at for any A/B test and want to make sure we're moving in a positive direction. And as you can see, these optimize the entire product. They're not optimizing a specific feature of the product. So the first step of any A/B test is to write down the goal ahead of time. It's really, really hard to be disciplined when you see a super exciting number like 160% lift. But it also helps you think about what's the behavior that you're hoping to change, and what do you want to learn from this A/B test? What effect are you hoping to see on the product? And then everyone on the project is on the same page. So you've written it down, you've had these discussions about what behavior you're hoping to change and how you're going to measure it. So our hypothesis, getting back to the groups example, is that we can get people in more groups, and that when they're in those groups, that will positively affect their engagement with the product. So the hidden hypothesis here is that getting people in groups is good for Yammer, is good for their engagement in Yammer. We thought we'd measure success because we'd see an increase in engagement, meaning we're getting people in groups that are actually good for them, an increase in 7-day retention, meaning we're positively impacting new users' experience, and our local metric, an increase in group joins. So you can see we set out saying that we would measure both a combination of a local feature metric and a global metric that optimizes the entire product. And so what happened with that groups experiment? Engagement was completely flat. So we absolutely did nothing for your Yammer experience. Retention was flat. So we didn't positively impact new users at all. And the really interesting number is if you look at overall group joins across the entire product, not just that light box, it was flat. And so what happened was we actually just cannibalized the groups you would have joined from somewhere else in the product. So while that number looked amazing, it actually was in no way beneficial to your overall Yammer experience. And so we didn't ship it. We didn't achieve the goal that we set out to achieve, and we believe that it could have introduced complexity, so we did not ship that change. So that was an interesting example, but maybe the control that we had wasn't as terrible as before. So I want to talk about an example, where it's obviously better. This is the hardest kind of thing. It's the thing that when you look at it, you look at your new solution and it is just obviously better. Like any sane person looking at it would agree that of course this is a good idea, let's just ship it. Why bother with an A/B test? So there's a bit of background. These headlines are actually recent, but this example is from about a year ago. Mobile web was a huge deal. Like everyone was talking about mobile web, the press was talking about mobile web, like everyone was asking, your product is nothing if you don't have a mobile web strategy. Internally, all the engineers were asking us, like, what's our mobile web strategy? Let's invest in mobile web. And so we also get a lot of traffic on mobile, and so we knew there was an opportunity there. But taking our entire site responsive and working it on mobile web was at least a year of work. That's a significant investment if you don't know what the payoff is going to be. So we decided to start with a single piece of Yammer, the conversation view. This is literally when you're viewing just a single message on Yammer, and this is what it looked like. So as you can see literally nothing. That's the message right off the page. And by the way, pinching and zooming was broken, so you couldn't pinch and zoom. So it looks terrible. So we thought, let's just start with this one page and test this out before we invest further in the rest of the solution. And so our hypothesis was that if we improve the experience of viewing this conversation, more people will take an action on it. They're more likely to like the message or to comment on the message, which we know are positively correlated with engagement and retention. So this is what we came up with. This was the mobile web version. So you can see it's optimized for mobile. You can actually see the conversation. You can like and reply, and it's pretty obvious what to do. So any rational person looking at this thinks like, well, of course this is better. The one on the left, you can't even see. I mean, it's impossible to read the conversation. Of course, the mobile web version is better. But we decided to A/B test it. And the results are really interesting. So for new users, the days engaged was flat. But they were 2% less likely to post messages. And for a big product like Yammer with 12 million users, 1 or 2% is actually pretty significant. That's a big deal. For existing users, this is even more interesting. We were basically terrible. So they were less likely to use Yammer. Their days engaged were down. The number of messages they were likely to post was down 10%, which is extremely terrible. And posting binary was down 1%. And what that means is binary is just a count of, as a user, did you post a message? It's a yes or a no answer, and then you count. So everything was negative. So we were sitting there thinking, like, what the hell happened? Where did we go wrong? Like, of course this looks better. So what happened? And so at this point, data doesn't tell you why something's happening. Data just tells you what is happening, and you start asking questions. So you start digging into the data a little bit more. So we started asking ourselves, okay, well, what theories do we have as to why this could have gone so wrong? And the first theory was, well, it was kind of a minimum experience. Maybe we missed something. Maybe there was some functionality that people really wanted that we left out of our new version. So we looked into the data, and it turns out that was not the case. The actions we had left out were pretty used infrequently in control, and so it was unlikely that that had caused the difference. So the second theory we had was, what about tablet? You know, tablets are much bigger, the experience is better, maybe it's not as shitty as the phone, so maybe the tablet experience swayed this. So we looked at tablets, and users that used tablets in the experiment were also negative. So it wasn't the tablet experience that was causing the problems. So then we thought, the other thing we left out of the mobile web was that groups list on the left. It was the ability to browse to other content. So maybe people really want to see something next. Maybe they come to Yammer to read this one message, but then they also want to do other things when they're done. And that was actually what had happened. People really wanted to view other content. And so once we found that out with user research, we could continue investing in mobile web, iterate on that, and then go from there and A/B test it again. And this is a really important point. If you're A/B testing and using data, you're going to be wrong often. It's just part of A/B testing. But it's okay. The most important thing is to soften the consequence of being wrong. If you know you're going to be wrong, you can soften the consequence by doing it quicker. So basically, with mobile web, that would have been incredibly painful if that had taken us an entire year to build. We would have shipped this product after a year of investing, and it would not have done very well, and we would have sat back having no idea why. But we spent a month on it, so it wasn't that painful to be wrong because we only spent a month. So you want to be wrong as fast as possible. You want to learn and adapt. This has come up a lot, I think, in this conference. At Yammer, actually, what's interesting about being wrong is that if we're not failing at least 50% of the time at Yammer, we ask ourselves if we're not being aggressive enough. Maybe we're not pushing the boundaries. Maybe we're being too cautious and we're not testing interesting enough things. And so you have to change, your entire organization has to believe that shipping is not success. Shipping does not define success anymore. Developers, designers, PMs, your leadership team, sales, everybody has to understand that shipping is not the goal. Learning something is the goal. Learning something about your users, learning something about their behavior, learning something from the A/B test is the goal, not shipping software. Because if you're shipping software in the wrong direction, it's not going to matter in the long term. You're going in the wrong direction. Culturally, you need to make it okay then to be wrong. So at Yammer, what we do is we discuss results publicly, we focus on the learning, and we hold each other accountable. So even if an A/B test, quote unquote, wins, we still ask each other, well, what did you learn from that? What can we apply to future decisions and future A/B tests? So we just talked about how we listened to the data and we A/B tested two things and it pointed us in the right direction. But I think with A/B testing, you can also over-rely on data and you start micro-optimizing and then data becomes a crutch. You stop taking big bets and you're worried about making a decision without having perfect data. And so I want to talk through an example of how this happened at Yammer. So recently, we were working on transitioning Yammer from basically a social network type product where you just communicate across the company to one where you use it in teams, where you're using it in groups. And so there was a feature where you could follow a conversation for updates. And at the time, we thought maybe it was really important. And so one of the PMs on the team thought, well, maybe what's confusing about this feature is the copy. Maybe the copy doesn't make sense, and that's why nobody's using it. And so we ran an A/B test of the copy. So I just want to show you where this copy was. Most of you probably didn't notice, but on this page, there's a little drop-down right here that opens a drop-down. That's the copy he A/B tested. You have to take a step back at this point and think like, what possible impact could this have had? It just doesn't matter. You have to be willing to take a risk, because it takes time and effort to A/B test something. It's not free. You want to learn something. What could we possibly have learned from this example? And so it's important not to fall into this trap of just micro-optimizing every little thing and being unwilling to take a risk. So you have to have a product opinion. We can't afford to A/B test everything. We can't afford to A/B test every possible color combination, every possible padding, every possible margin. We have to have a product opinion, and we can't lose sight of the bigger picture. Don't waste time unless you think it's going to make an impact. A/B testing enables you to take risks. Because you can't isolate every variable, you're never going to be 100% certain why something failed. But data will point you in the right direction. You can start asking questions like we did with mobile web. So you want to have a vision for the experience, the user experience that you want to deliver, and then you can dig into the data, whether it was a win or a loss, and generate a hypothesis as to why. So you want to empower people on your team to have an opinion, and then use data to validate that opinion. So how does product vision comes in? This comes up a lot because most people think as soon as you start A/B testing, you give up your product vision and you become a slave to data. And this is actually data-driven development, although it was the title of my talk, is also slightly controversial because it kind of implies that you're then a slave to the data. So I want to talk about this a little more. Does this mean that if something doesn't test well, we don't ship it? Where does product vision come in? So data cannot replace your product vision. Let's be clear about that. It's not going to tell you what to build. You have to start with the vision. You have to start with the idea of what you want to do, and then you can deliver in small batches to learn and test your way there and seeing if you're going in the right direction or not. Data is not going to tell you why. It's not going to tell you what to do next, but it is going to help you course correct and make sure you're going in the right direction. And so to do this, you want to have small iterations with testable assumptions. Again, this has come up frequently today, but I think this is really important. You have to find a way to break your vision down, break your long-term goal down into testable assumptions, and then test them as quickly as you can. You want to find out as quickly as possible, are you on the right track? Should you double down? Or maybe you should pivot. Maybe that is not the right direction for your product. You want to state these assumptions so that you can prove or disprove them. Data is also not going to tell you if you've hit local maxima. And local maxima basically means you've hit the limit of your current design. Without doing something radical, you're not going to see radical impact to your product. So you might be able to optimize it a little bit more and hit that first hill, but you're not going to be able to tell if there's another hill out there. And by the way, if you start aiming for that second hill, you're not going to get positive results the whole way. There's this huge dip in the middle. You're likely going to see flat, or you're likely going to see negative numbers. And this is where product vision comes in, and where it's important to what we call strategically ship things. So what that means at Yammer is basically a strategic ship is, at the beginning of a project, this happens very, very rarely, we state if it's strategic or not. Do we think this project is on the way to this next big mountain? And if it is, then we allow ourselves to ship it, even if it tests flat. Sometimes even if it tests negative, because we have the conviction that what is out there is by an order of magnitude better than what we have today. And so at Yammer, what happened recently along this path was, this was Yammer, I think maybe a year ago. This is just built up over 5 years of A/B testing. You can tell it's cluttered, it's confusing, you're not really sure where to focus your attention because there's so many blue links. It looks a little bit like Facebook. And we knew all of this. And so we decided to redesign the product. And when we set about with this redesign, we had two main goals. The first was the strategic shift to groups that I talked a little bit about before, helping people get into groups more. And the second was to declutter and clean up the UI. And we said at the beginning that we believed this was a strategic project, that we wanted to redesign the product and we would ship it even if the A/B test was flat. And so what happened? This was the design we came up with, much cleaner. We tested first this main page and then we broke it up into other pieces, but this is what we started with. And so the results were really interesting. It was indeed flat, most of it, but you can see invites, virality, which is super important to us, as I mentioned, were down extremely significantly. And so what this means is not, without A/B testing, we either wouldn't have known this and would have shipped it anyway, or it would have tested negative and we would have given up. But at this point, we knew most of the design was actually okay, because it was flat, except this one piece, this piece around virality. And so it allows us to iterate just on this piece without reevaluating everything. And so that's what we did, of course, and then that's what you see in product today. So this is the invite module that we added to compensate for that. And so in summary, I think there's 3 main things that are really important if you want to begin A/B testing at your organization. The first one is to celebrate learning, not shipping. Everybody in the organization needs to be aligned with this. And actually at Yammer, this is what we sell our customers. That's the enterprise piece that I mentioned. We sell our customers on this idea that we learn stuff from every A/B test, that we're shipping stuff that we know is good for their end users and is beneficial for the engagement with the product. The second is finding metrics that work for your product. What Yammer uses is probably not the same metrics that you should use, but find metrics that optimize your entire product, not a specific feature. And your entire organization needs to feel responsible for this. And the last is create short testable assumptions. We're all still learning. You're gonna make mistakes, but try to minimize the cost of those mistakes. And by creating short testable assumptions, you can invalidate them very quickly. You can have an opinion and a vision and then test your way there. Thank you.
Super, thanks a lot. Let me kick off with a question that is actually very dear to my heart. We at Google do this a lot, obviously. Google is famous for that. One thing we struggle with is, what's the focus on A/B testing, and where do you stop because you can't A/B test out of a local maximum, right? So at Yammer, what do you test? What specifically don't you test A/B?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We A/B test almost everything. I think the scale of what we A/B test matters. And so I would say we probably have 3 different things. The first is like very small, short ideas that we know are gonna be an optimization. We know it's not gonna produce like a significant change to the product, but we think we can do just a little bit better. The second is these like big radical changes, and that's stuff like redesigning our entire product. It's stuff like adding in the ability to communicate with somebody outside your company in Yammer. This is like a big idea, a big deal for Yammer. And we still A/B test those. They're just on a much different magnitude. And the last one is features that we don't A/B test. And these are like very minor things, like security fixes, generally functionality for admins, anything where we take a look at it and we think, what would we learn by A/B testing it, and would it change our decision to ship it or not? And if the answer is, we're not gonna learn anything, and it won't change our decision, then we don't A/B test it and we just ship it. But that's very, very rare.
What you had not mentioned now is big things. I mean, like at Google, right? We think we can test everything to a certain point, and then it becomes, in a sense, innovation, and it's hard to A/B test really big innovations. So, but you hadn't mentioned this one.
It's really, really hard to do that. Yeah, I would say we're still learning and still figuring out how to do that.
Okay, makes sense. Questions?
Hi, thanks very much. That was a really good talk. I've got 2 questions. Is that against the rules, or
no?
Can I get 2 in one?
Well, let's hear the first.
Yeah. So the first one, I'll just get them both at the same time. How many A/B tests are you running like now? Like, how much time is this taking up, and how big is your team to be able to manage all that? I'd be interested to know that. And you talked about that A/B testing doesn't give you the why. Do you ever augment your A/B testing with, say, usability testing, where you can find out the why oftentimes?
Yeah, good question. So the first question, we probably have on the order of 40 to 50 A/B tests going at any given time, something like that. We have a team of around 15, I think, product managers right now. So for the most part, they're responsible for that end to end. Again, we're at such a large scale, so we can generally let A/B tests run about 2 to 3 weeks before they reach statistical significance. That's also because we test for 7-day retention. And so just by nature of that, it's at least 2 weeks till you get a full week of new users. The second question is about usability. We heavily use user research, actually, both before we do a feature to figure out like how much to actually build, and then also after. So in the mobile web case, actually, a lot of those answers came from user research, because the data could only tell us so much. The data can kind of tell you, like, invites are down, but they're not gonna tell you why. Like, maybe you left something out, maybe people couldn't figure out how to use it, maybe it was too hidden, And that all for us comes from user research.
Over there.
So your presentation was entitled A/B testing in the enterprise.
Yes.
What is different about B2B versus B2C here?
So for us, we're in a weird position in that we A/B test on the B2C part. So we A/B test on our end users. What's different for us in the enterprise is that we have IT admins calling us up in a fury when they see an A/B test. They don't generally love it. But again, this is where the metrics come in. We're super public about the metrics that we look at, and it's part of across the organization. So if you buy Yammer and you're an IT admin buying Yammer, all throughout the sales cycle, when you have like a customer manager, and anytime you talk to anyone on the product team, we're constantly re-emphasizing these numbers. And actually, when we talk about our roadmap and shipping features, we always caveat it with this fact. So we say, like, look, we're optimizing the entire product. We're optimizing it for the benefit of your network, and we're doing that by testing it. And so it's a very difficult decision because a lot of admins don't love that. But we find if we talk about the process with them and sell them on the methodology versus like the specific feature set they're getting, that goes a long way.
Actually, I have a final one if nobody else has one. So was there another one? Sorry, yeah, please. Actually, I'm asking mine in between. What's the best thing and the worst thing about being acquired by Microsoft?
Oh.
Even if you have not been there at the time, but for the product, what did it mean for the product?
For the product. The best thing for us has been the scale. So I mentioned we have 12 million users. I think Outlook has something insane, like multi-100 million users, 500 million or something like that. That's the best part for us. As we start integrating with them, we start seeing a lot of those benefits. So that's been really interesting. The worst part is that as soon as we got acquired, again, we're in the enterprise, Yammer was a startup, and so we could kind of constantly say to people like, no, we're not building that security feature, like, no, we're not doing all that stuff. Yeah. As soon as you get the Microsoft branding, everybody expects that of you. So everybody expects that you're HIPAA compliant and that you're compliant with EU model clauses and all these ridiculous security features that are very important, but literally as soon as you become part of Microsoft, it's like a requirement.
Perfect, yeah. Last question.
So to build upon that, in the enterprise, one of the things I know is that experiments create friction and slows things down. At least that's a perception. Like, you're taking time to learn, but that's great, but you're not really shipping what I want.
Yeah.
How have you in Yammer and Microsoft been able to navigate that space of, we're going to learn, but we might take a month more to actually ship out what you want, and we might not even ship it if the data doesn't back it up?
It's really hard. That's honestly like the hardest part. So part of it is that we're constantly talking about this. We're constantly talking about the benefits of A/B testing. I will say we're just under constant pressure. Like, of course, we're always getting feature requests. We're always getting people saying, like, why aren't you building that? Why aren't you doing that? Why did this not ship? I loved that feature. And so it's just in every single one of those conversations, we constantly emphasize that the reason Yammer is here and the reason that we've done so well is that we're delivering value to the end users. And that's ultimately what they should care about. That's ultimately why like admins and people in the enterprise want to use your product, right? Hopefully you're delivering some value. So the argument we have is that A/B testing lets us prove that value and only work on things that are valuable. So rather than spending 2 years building our mobile web solution, if that's not valuable, we learn that very quickly, and then we can move resources in another direction.
Super. So Lindsay, thank you so much. This was super insightful, super specific, super valuable for all of us. Thank you.